Researching this really took me back to my childhood, to a place I loved and hold fond memories of, a place that was magical. But little did I know, the dark secret, it held years before I ever arrived.
Welcome to Nemesis. True crime, true crime. Welcome to Nemesis.
Hello friends. If you grew up like I did, you didn't have holidays, you had days out. And in the 70s, if you lived in London and you had a mum who wanted to give you the world on a budget, that day out was Brighton. I was one when I first went, and I was 13 the last time she took me, because after that I went with my friends, the way you do when you're growing up, and your mum stops being the one you want beside you. Every summer in between, though, it was her and me. We'd get to the station with a straw bag. That bag held everything. My swimming costume, my hat, the sun cream, my mum's flat shoes for the walk, a big bottle of orange squash that was always too warm and never once tasted right, and a plastic cup for me. My mum carried a flask of hot tea. In the sweltering heat, a flask of hot tea, because she was that generation and it didn't matter what the weather was doing. And then you'd step off the train at Brighton and the smell would hit you. I don't think you notice smells as an adult the way you do as a child. That one was sea salt and fish and chips and sticky rock. Always the pink rock, because the pink was minty. That smell meant the whole day was still in front of you. It meant excitement. It meant fun. My mum would take my hand and we'd walk down Queen's Road towards the seafront. It's about half a mile, mostly downhill, 10 or 15 minutes, and I'd be skipping to keep up with her the whole way, playing our game of who could spot the sea first. Everyone was on that walk. Other children squealing, mums and dads shouting at them to slow down and watch the road. Laughter. There was always laughter. And at the end of the day, when the light had gone soft and gold and my feet were sore and my belly was full, we'd make the long walk back up that same hill to the station. It was always the saddest part, that climb, tired and sticky and covered in dried salt, the day behind you instead of in front. But I never once remembered the train home. I was asleep on my mum's lap before it had even pulled out of the platform, safe and carried and going home. That's Brighton. That's what everyone remembers about Brighton. The laughter and the sea and the chips and the rock, and a child asleep on the way home, certain in her bones that someone was watching over her. Now, 40 years before any of that, in June 1934, there was a different smell in Brighton station. Brighton has only ever had the one railway station, the end of the line from London. Every soul who came down for the day arrived through the same doors, under the same great curved roof. There was no other way in. I came through those doors every summer of my childhood. So did she. That is the first thing I want you to understand before I tell you what happened, because it is the thing I cannot get out of my head. In the summer of 1934, in the left luggage office of that station, a smell had begun to grow. At first it was nothing, the sort of thing a busy man walks past on a hot day, but it thickened. Day by day it got worse until it could no longer be ignored. It had been there, we now know, for 11 days. 11 days of holiday makers passing within feet of it, laughing, hurrying for their trains, buckets and spades and straw bags, never once suspecting. And here is where it takes the breath out of me. That left luggage office is in the station. The station I walk through, hand in my mum's hand, skipping to keep up, on the best day of every year. Children like me pass that office all summer long, sticky with rock, thinking about the sea. Not one of us knew. Whatever was on that shelf, we walked right past it to get to our happy day. On the 17th of June, a cloakroom attendant named William Vinicum could stand it no longer. He followed that smell to a plywood trunk that had been left in his care and never collected. He called the police, and when they lifted the lid, they found her. Inside was the body of a young woman, not whole. Whoever had put her there had seen to that. The trunk held her torso and her arms wrapped in brown paper. The next day, at a railway station on the other side of London, at King's Cross, her legs were found in a separate case and confirmed as hers. Her head and one of her arms were never found at all, and there was one clue, one word, written on the wrapping in pencil: Ford. 90 years on, it has never been explained, never matched to a name, an address, a shop, a person. One word, and then nothing. So who was she? Here is everything we know. She was young, perhaps 25. She was well nourished and cared for. Her hands were soft, and her feet were soft, and she was 5 months into carrying the life inside her. That is her. That is the whole of what is known about a woman who lived 25 years, and the terrible thing is how little of it is actually about her. It is a height. It is an age. It is the condition of her skin. There is not one thing in that list that tells you what she was like. She had a whole life, 25 years of it, maybe married to the father of her unborn child, maybe running away because of it. So many maybes, and yet nothing solid. I keep coming back to her being 5 months gone. That is not the very beginning. She would have known for months. She would have felt the life inside her move by then. Somebody, somewhere, would have noticed. And still, nobody came. 700 missing women were looked at. 700. And she was not one of them, because nobody had reported her missing at all. So where did the police begin? They began where the body pointed them. This was not the work of a passing madman. Whoever had done this had taken her apart with care and put the pieces where they were unlikely to be found, and known enough to make her almost impossible to name. That spoke, the police thought, of a certain kind of knowledge, a certain kind of hand, and there was a man in Brighton who had exactly that, an abortionist, a man who, quietly and for the right sort of money, ended pregnancies in a country where doing so was a crime. She was 5 months into carrying the life inside her. She was young, and as far as the police were concerned, a frightened girl who had told no one. To the men working the case, it fit like a key in a lock. A discreet arrangement gone wrong, and a professional man with the skill to undo his mistake and the nerve to hide it. They had their theory. They had, very nearly, their man. And then the finest pathologist in the country looked at what was left of her and took the theory apart. Sir Bernard Spilsbury found no sign that anyone had tried to end her pregnancy. None. And the cutting that had seemed so knowing, so surgical, was nothing of the sort. It was clumsy, crude, the work of someone who had hacked, not operated. Whoever took her apart had no medical skill at all. The key did not fit the lock. Whatever else he was, Spilsbury's findings meant the abortionist was very likely not the man. And here is where the story turns cold, colder than any knife, because the police did not chase him anyway. This man kept the names of the women who came to him. Respectable names, well-connected names, wives and daughters of the sort of men who could make a policeman's career or end it. And to pull that thread all the way to the light would have meant those names spilling out with it. So the thread was left alone. Not because he was proven innocent. He wasn't. Simply because following it any further was more trouble than one nameless dead girl was worth. There is something else in this story, and it has nothing to do with the killer. It is about the rest of us, about how we look at the dead, and how quickly we decide which of them deserves our sorrow. That same summer, in that same town, another woman was killed. She too ended up hidden away, found in the discarded pieces of a life, and the newspapers that wept over our nameless young woman had almost nothing kind to say about her, because our young woman, the one in the trunk at the station, was thought to be respectable. And do you know how they decided that? They looked at her feet. Her feet were soft, uncalloused. The feet of a woman who had never once had to walk miles for her bread, never stood all day on hard ground to earn a living, never known the kind of hardship that marks a body and leaves it worn. And from that, from the simple softness of her feet, the world drew its conclusion. Here was a woman of the better sort, someone cared for, someone worth their sorrow. They even gave her a gentle name for it. They called her the girl with the pretty feet, and they wrote about her almost lovingly. The other woman was poor. She sold her body to live. Her life had been hard, and that hardness would have shown on her too, in the very same way, written into her hands and her feet and her skin. And the papers wrote about her with a curl of the lip, as though her death was somehow less of a loss. Think about what that means. They looked at two dead women, read the story of their lives off their bodies, and decided one was worth weeping over and the other was not. Not by anything they had done, by how hard their lives had been. The one who had suffered least in life was mourned the most in death. And here is the part I will not soften. We still do it. Right now. Today. We still do it. When a death appears in the news, some quiet part of us reaches for the details, the job, the background, the choices made, and decides how much grief the person is owed. We do it without. Meaning too. We do it in a heartbeat. And we are almost never honest with ourselves that we have done it at all. But grief is not a prize for good behaviour. A life is not worth more because it was lived respectably, and it is not worth less because it was lived hard, or poor, or in ways that made other people uncomfortable. Every one of these women was somebody. Every one of them mattered exactly the same. And the fact that 90 years later we are still learning that lesson over and over tells you it was never really about them. It was about us. So what happened to her? Nobody knows. That is the answer. And it does not get better with time. Nobody knows who she was. Nobody knows who killed her. And here is the part that I don't think gets said often enough about this case. Nobody knows how she died. Spilsbury examined what he had, and he could not tell. There it is, in his own notes. The internal examination of the torso did not reveal the cause of death. The most famous pathologist in the country, the man the Home Office sent for when it mattered, looked at that young woman and could not say what had killed her, because whoever did this took her head. Think about what is above the shoulders. That is her face, and her face is her name, and that is why people always say he took it. But that is not all he took. If she was strangled, it is her throat that says so. If she was struck, it is her skull. If she was smothered, it is in her eyes. Everything that tells you how a person died is in the part of her that was never found. He didn't only take her name away, he took the answer with it. And now the two roads out of this case, and I will be honest with you, I cannot get down either of them. The first is the one the police believed. She was 5 months into carrying the life inside her, in a country where ending a pregnancy was a crime, And there was a doctor in that town who did exactly that for a living and had powerful people on his books. It fits. It has a shape to it, and shapes are comforting when you have nothing else. But Spilsbury said there was no interference with the pregnancy. None. And a doctor, whatever else he was, would have taken her apart at the joints, the way you would expect from a man who knew where the joints were. Whoever cut this woman up did not know what they were doing. The second road is that she died some other way, at somebody else's hands, in a room we know nothing about, and that whoever it was cut her up badly because they were terrified and had never done such a thing before, and had a body in the house and no idea what to do with it. That fits what Spilsbury found exactly. It also has nothing else behind it at all. No name, no room, no reason. So take your pick. A theory the evidence argues against, or a theory with no evidence at all. But before you choose, there is one thing about that trunk that almost nobody stops to look at. Everyone argues about the cutting. Nobody argues about the wrapping, because the cutting was clumsy, yes, but the packing was not. She had been laid in cotton wool to soak up what a body gives out. The paper around her had been soaked in oil so that nothing would seep through it and give the trunk away. Layered, considered. The work of someone who knew that fluid escapes and knew exactly how to stop it. That is not a frightened amateur reaching for a bedsheet. That is a method. And ask yourself who, in 1934, has cotton wool by the yard and oil-soaked paper already to hand, who has solved this exact problem before, quietly, over and over, for women who could never be seen leaving with a stain on them. The hands that cut her knew nothing. The hands that packed her knew everything. And those may have been the very same hands, hiding the one skill by making sure you only ever looked at the other. Nobody looked at the wrapping. They were all too busy looking at the wounds. That is the silence at the heart of this. Not that they had nothing. They had a suspect, and a pathologist, and Scotland Yard, and 10,000 letters from the public, and 700 missing women reviewed, and a whole nation reading about her over breakfast every day for a fortnight. They had all of it. And still no one chased the one man whose trade fit that trunk, because his book of names held wives and daughters of the sort of people a policeman does not embarrass. Not because he was cleared, simply because the truth was more trouble than one nameless dead girl was judged to be worth. She has been dead 90 years, and everything anyone knows about her would fit on a postcard. And here is the last thing. The thing I want you to carry out of here. This woman, the one in the trunk, the one with no name, she was one of the lucky ones. Think about that. She was found. She was noticed. A whole nation opened its newspaper and wondered about her. The cleverest men of the age gave her their time. For 90 years, people like you and me have kept turning her over, refusing quite to let her go. And she got all of that without anyone ever knowing who she was. Now think of the others. The ones who were never found. The ones who were never even reported. The women whose absence made no ripple at all, because no one was waiting for them to come home. They vanished, and the world did not pause, did not print a headline, did not send a single detective. They simply stopped being, and no one noticed the gap where they had stood. Every one of them was somebody. Every one of them woke on their last ordinary morning with plans. Someone to see, something to look forward to, a future they were quietly counting on. They laughed at things. They hoped for things. And all of it ended, unmarked, unmourned, in a silence so complete that we do not even know their names to grieve them. Our woman in the trunk is remembered because her silence was loud enough to hear. Most silence isn't. So that is where I have to leave her. Not solved, not named, not even in the end explained. And I will be honest with you, the way I always try to be. My heart is not settled about this one. That is not me telling you what to think. It is just what I am left with when the lights come up. A feeling, not a verdict. Something in this story does not sit right in me, and I have a suspicion it never quite will. I told you at the start how those days ended. The long walk back up the hill to the station, tired and full and sticky with salt, and how I never once remembered the journey home because I was asleep on my mum's lap before the train had even left the platform. Safe. Carried. Someone's whole world going home. She got a train out of Brighton too. Not asleep on anyone's lap. Not carried by anyone who loved her. She left that station in a trunk on a luggage shelf, and part of her went out on another line entirely, and there was no one at either end waiting for her to arrive. No one counting the stops. No one who would ever know she had not come home. She was a young woman, around 25 years old. She had soft hands and soft feet, and a whole life folded up inside her that she never got to open. She was 5 months along, with the life she carried, lost with her on the same day. She was a human being, no less than you or me, and she deserved every single year that was taken from her. She does not have a name for us to say. So we cannot do the one thing we would most like to do, which is to say it. But we can do this. We can refuse to let her be nothing. We can let her be the reason a few thousand people tonight, in their kitchens and on their sofas, thought for a moment about a woman who died 90 years ago and was never mourned by anyone who knew her. That is not nothing. On a night like tonight, that is very nearly everything. So before you go back to your evening, spare a small kind thought for the woman in the trunk at Brighton station, and for the ones who never even got that far. As always, we try to be the voice for those who can't speak. Thank you for being here with me. Have a good week, and stay safe.
We will meet next time. We will meet next time. We will meet next time.